Visionary. By Douglas Milewski. Elemental P. United States. Copyright 2016 by Douglas Milewski. All rights reserved. Chapter 22. The governor wanted a personal briefing on the crisis. Fate drove us to the Baroness's house, Ed leading with his own staff car. We spent the evening sweltering in the dining room as Fate explained the situation. I kept looking for Cymbeline, but she was nowhere to be seen. I didn't know which boom would be bigger, that TNT in Baltimore or Fate and Cymbeline meeting again. The Baroness stood firm in her desire to settle this crisis peacefully. She believed that a calm, patient siege would bring people to their senses. Fate disagreed. The rank and file are ready to walk out and surrender, but Rooney has the guns and he's nervous. He knows his advantage. The more people that he has, the more people that he gets to blow up. He'll take down with him just for spite. How do you know this? Did he say this in so many words? Fate studied the woman a long time, like a bridge player with only 2 cards left to play. I borrowed his pen. His pen. Yes, his pen. There were thought bubbles left on his pen. The Baroness' face softened into a smile. Interesting. I had not thought to apply that skill in such a way, but now that you say it, I see what a great resource it would bring to negotiations. It grants great advantage. No, my dear, it grants great reassurance. Used in concert, estranged parties would know that there would be no room for lies or treachery, and so only sincere negotiations could take place. Fate didn't blink at the statement. Hogwash. In negotiation, duplicity is presumed. That suspicion keeps us careful and diligent. When we relax that basic diligence, then we fall prey to a left-hand right-hand style exploit, where we interact with the honest right hand but never with the dishonest left. Your assessment is, unfortunately, correct. So what do you suggest? Fate toyed with her few cards. Now that I've demonstrated my worth and provided value to you, you need to provide value to me. I need assurances as to my own safety once this crisis is resolved. So you do know something. Fate betrayed nothing of her emotions by her stance. I learned their code word for standing down. From the pen? Yes, from the pen. How do you know it's the most recent code word? I don't, but the impression was quite strong, and so I am reasonably confident. Then I give you my personal assurance that you will be pardoned. I've done nothing to pardon, but I accept your pardon, in writing, along with immunity from prosecution. You've done nothing wrong. Reprisals, Baroness. I've been a communist and will continue to be a communist. I was never one because it was fashionable. From my perspective, it is the only system fair to the common man. Injustice derives from power and power derives from money. Without solving the disparity of income, you cannot solve the disparity of justice. The Baroness kept on her pretty face, but now I knew her look as a political face. I had seen her genuine smiles, and this one wasn't genuine. She put her hands on the table. I hear your concerns. While I cannot solve all ills, I do know that I want all the ills of our world solved. However, I cannot control power and politics forever. What I promise here today cannot bind anyone for tomorrow. I am sorry about that. You of all people understand my limitations. What I can do is to create a list of communists who, like you, have striven for the common man rather than participate in this corrupt system. That will help more people than yourself. Is this acceptable? Fate reached out her hands, placing them onto the table. Closing her eyes, she thought for some moments. This is acceptable. May I have a piece of paper? On the pad she wrote out a list. I thought that there would just be a few names, but she listed many, where they worked and why each one wasn't worth investigating. On a second piece of paper she wrote down names of people who should be prosecuted at all costs. I have evidence, she said. For that information she charged us nothing, which indicated to me just how much she hated those people. Fate studied us all for a while, then turned to Ed. The code words are, my darling Clementine. While Ed raced back to his command post, we ran around looking for someone who sounded like the communist radio operator in Philadelphia. If we were to send a false message, it had to sound right. Charlie, said Joe. You want Charlie? Charlie shook his head. Joe wasn't taking no for an answer. What? You don't want to save the lives of people? What's up with you? You can talk in emergencies. This is an emergency. You gotta do it. As a group, we wandered into the radio tent. The Army Corps had erected a large antenna in the Baroness's yard, no doubt annoying her neighbors. The thing was big enough to transmit wherever they wanted it to go, but we only had to talk to Baltimore. When the reporters saw us walking in, they came swarming down. Joe kept them outside but let them crowd around. You need to stay quiet. The radio operator was freaked out by the whole affair. He was just a corporal in the Signal Corps. The plan began when Pratt Street radioed that Ed had arrived back at HQ. You may proceed, said the governor. Comrade Fate said the words. Charlie echoed them into the microphone. He practiced a few phrases, changing his ordinary raspy voice into the sort of monotone that radio broadcasters used. This is Philadelphia. Stand by for an important message. Repeat. This is Philadelphia. Stand by for an important message. My darling Clementine. Repeat. My darling Clementine. Message ends. Now it was time to see if it worked. We had to wait. This is Baltimore, please confirm, said the radio. Message reads, My darling Clementine. Confirmed, said Charlie. Fate leaned in. Now broadcast Camptown races. That's the code that says that the code is compromised. Tell all stations to repeat those 2 messages every 5 minutes for the next hour. Charlie breathed in, then spoke. Camptown races. I repeat, Camptown races. All stations, repeat these 2 messages every 5 minutes for the next hour. Camptown races. The next few minutes would show us the result. Fate's reputation rode on this working. I had thought that the tension in the tent came from the message, but when I turned around to see Cymbeline staring at Fate, I found that I was wrong. Those two were nearly at war. I doubt that they even realized that anyone else was in the tent anymore. Before I could intervene, the Baroness had one arm around each woman, walking both of them out of the tent. John, report immediately when we know something. I believe that I must hold a meeting now. Those two walked unwillingly into the house. The switchboard for the phone was in the same tent as the radio. The phone company had pulled trunk lines to the property, putting a girl there who did her best to ignore every soldier around her. When I sat down next to her, she looked afraid that I might talk to her, but she did seem a little relieved that I wasn't another private. I'm waiting for the call from downtown. She nodded. I waited. A line rang before I could even relax. Governor's house, the girl said. I got her man right here. She made a connection, then pointed to the phone beside her. Pratt Street. I grabbed the line. Ed. What's up? Ed skipped the niceties. They've put up the white flag. Somebody's coming out. With no one here, I needed to implement our arrangement with Comrade Fate. Now was the best time. We have that list of names. Set the innocents free. Only keep the worst offenders. Ed didn't even meet me with silence. Are you nuts? Too many people were dead for me to back off. That's the deal. We're keeping our deal. I read him Fate's list of shame. What if they disguise themselves? Good point. We'll have to identify them. I'll come down with Fate as soon as I can. There's no women on the naughty list. Release all the women immediately, and any kids. Anyone under 18. You got it? And you protect them. Don't let the crowd get them. I got it. Ed sounded frustrated. Meanwhile, the radio continued buzzing. Philadelphia was now broadcasting a counterman furiously, but the damage had been done. Fate's communication bomb had done its job. Multiple other headquarters had raised white flags. Charlie stayed on the radio, responding as if he were Philadelphia. In the end, I think that most of the communists knew this ruse for what it was, but they wanted an out and were willing to take it. Almost nobody wanted to blow themselves up. I wanted to leave for downtown immediately, but the Baroness took her time sorting out Cymbeline and Fate. I suspect that those two had many hatchets to bury, while she had to be sure that their spat didn't undermine her precarious government. The reporters hadn't even bothered typing this time. I had longhand pages shoved at me. During that frenzy, I signed every story without bothering to read it. I even signed stories that the censor who'd spelled me earlier in the day had rejected. I figured that I outranked him, and you couldn't really fire me because no one had hired me. When Pratt Street reported in again, the communists had declared that they were sending out the women first. Presumably, the senior party members were staying in until they were sure that there was no duplicity afoot, as they burned all the evidence against them. With those papers went the location of over $100 million in public funds. We still don't know where that money went. That's the job I would have gotten if I had gone with the Treasury. Fate eventually emerged from the house. She showed nothing that betrayed her state. How are things going? I answered, the women have been released. We need to go downtown to make sure that the deal gets followed. The drive down to Baltimore proved uncomfortable. The elephant in the car with us was her relationship with Cymbeline. She drove us for a while before she spoke. Why didn't you mention her? I didn't need to. You should have. How could I have known? You both had assumed names. That's a point to you. She had been on too many debate teams. Fate drove. I wish that she would go faster, but she would not go faster. Will you choose her? I shook my head. I'm not sure that I get to choose. Maybe the only choice I've ever had is to walk away and lose myself again. Living hand to mouth isn't so bad. She braked hard as she made a turn. You're better than that. I'm not required to choose anybody. And even if I choose, my choice doesn't really matter. Relationships take two people. A choice is just an offer. The ball travels to your court. Reject me, then I go off to another choice, and even then the next still has the opportunity to reject me. No, that's not a choice. Fate kept her eyes on the road. Second point to you. It was time to take a risk. If you give me an honest answer now, then I could choose. She shifted gears angrily. I don't want to be the supplicant. Why should I put my heart out when you can just walk away? If it's her, then it's her, otherwise it's me, but in reality it's her with me as the second choice. The real choice will always be her. Point to you. So you want her? There was that question again. I don't know anymore. People keep telling me to take her, but there's something missing about her. She's cold. My bet is that a kiss may thaw her a bit, but she'll never melt. Fate hit the brakes, coming up short on the side of the road. I must have said the right things because our lips met. My heart melted in all the places where Cymbeline had touched. That burning in truth had been nothing but freezing. I had known from the beginning that she was inhospitable, but now Fate's lips proved my conjecture. In them I tasted fire. A second later, that little kiss ended. When she pulled away, she smiled, no shame to her. Why should she be shamed? Once again, she had won her game. Mine was the heart that melted. You don't have to tell me that you love me. That's never a statement that you believe out of a woman. Even if I did, I don't know how to love you. You aren't really like anyone else. Will you forgive me for that? Yes. I admit, I don't really know how to love you either. Her pause fell there. Darling, she added like a pot dropping on the floor. That word sounded so inappropriate from her, I chuckled. I can say darling if I want. I still laughed. Yes, but it sounds funny from you. I'm not in practice, she stated as if practice mattered. Neither am I. That made her pause. So there's never been. No. It's hard to love me too. That should have been awkward, but it didn't feel awkward. It felt like some walls tumbling down. Fate put the car into gear again. At every stop I felt obligated to kiss her because that's what any other girl would want at this point, but when I leaned over she glowered at me. I wondered if this is what two porcupines felt as they circled about each other, not even knowing whether they wanted to risk the skewers. Was I crazy for entertaining the idea? I didn't know, but I did know that she had always acted in my favor. She delivered on every promise that she had made. If that didn't count for something, then I don't know what did. And for all this summer, I hadn't found myself resenting her too much, as trying as she might be. Once we arrived at Pratt Street, Fate identified the communists. As each group came through, she indicated who was who. The nice list were put onto army trucks and dropped off wherever they asked. The naughty list were locked up on the top floor of a restaurant. The explosives engineers rushed in as soon as the last communist exited. Damn, that took guts. With everyone identified, fate drove me home and dropped me off without a kiss. Aren't you going to invite me up? I smiled when I realized that I didn't need to decide. We could figure this out just like everyone else. I'm not so easily caught.